Alabama's top tier. Georgia certainly joined them in 2021 if they weren't there already, but cemented that position with the national championship. Ohio State. What about the Buckeyes, though? Welcome to the Voice of College Football. We break down the game we all love each and every day with you. Best discussion, debate, and analysis of the game we all love each and every day. Please like the video. Even if you don't agree with me, please hit the like button if you enjoy this kind of content. And share the video out on social media. Subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. Give me a ring on our call-in shows. Let's talk college football. All right. Our comparison right here is Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State. Clemson fans, we're not discarding the work of Dabo Swinney in recent years, but this is a recruiting debate, and Clemson simply does not belong in the argument. So we're focused on recruiting and not necessarily just the results on the field, but recruiting. Why? Well, we had a conversation a couple weeks ago with Steve Dace from Michigan Podcast. He states it's his view that Alabama and Georgia are recruiting better than anyone, and then there's a gap before you get to Ohio State. I am taking the deep dive into that conversation. We'll see what we unpack right here. Let's first check out the results. And again, this is not a results-driven video, so I'm not trying to debate that Ohio State has played with Alabama and Georgia on the field since 2017, but that the Buckeyes may or may not be recruiting on the same level. But first to the field. Alabama 64-6. They've won 3 SEC championships, 2 national championships, are 6-2 in the playoffs, including 2 other trips to the national championship game. Georgia's 58-10, 2 SEC titles. They've bookended our sample size of 2017 through 21 with 2 trips to the national championship game, of course, winning in 21. As for the Buckeyes, they last won the national title, of course, in 2014, so no national crowns during this sample size. The Buckeyes are 56-7, so that's better than Georgia, not quite as good as Alabama. 4 Big Ten championships, 1 and 2 in the playoffs, losing to Clemson controversially in 2019, avenging that loss, and then losing to Bama by 4 touchdowns in the 2020 national championship game. All right, let's look at the recruiting rankings, and let's start with the recruiting rankings, then we're going to dive deep. Alabama's recruiting rankings during this period of 6 recruiting classes. Number 1, 5, 1, 2, 1, and 2. They have signed 155 high school players during that time. Georgia, their recruiting classes have ranked 3, 1, 2, 1, 4, and 3. They've signed 5 less players than Alabama. Ohio State has ranked at 2 to 14 in 2019, then 5, 2, and 4. Let's keep in mind that recruiting class in 2019 for the Buckeyes only had 17 commits compared to 27 for Alabama and 24 for Georgia. That had much to do with it because guess what? Ohio State was actually number 3 in per player rating. Number 3 in the nation, despite having the 14th rated recruiting class according to 247 Sports. The Buckeyes at number 3 behind Alabama and Georgia. Okay, in our conversation with Steve, he talked about the distinction between Alabama and Georgia and then Ohio State being on the defensive side of the ball, that the Buckeyes were just not keeping up from a recruiting standpoint. We certainly know in watching the Ohio State defense over the past 5 or 6 seasons, Ohio State is not keeping up with Alabama and Georgia on the field defensively. I went through every player ranking in recruiting for these 6 recruiting classes to see how the Buckeyes are faring against Alabama and Georgia. Okay, if you're familiar with the 247 Sports ranking of players and the player rating, you know that 1.0 would be the perfect player. So nobody's got a 1.0. It starts around 0.99 something, something, something. And so I divided the players per 10th of a recruiting point. Alabama had 9 players that were near perfection in the recruiting rankings coming into college. Ohio State, this is just on the defensive side of the ball, surprisingly had just as many at the highest level defensively as Alabama, with Georgia was 7. Also, keep in mind there that Georgia had 12 players rate .98 to .99. There you see the numbers for Alabama and Ohio State. We're going to go through the list. I don't have to explain it. Basically, it's a descending order of player ratings on the defensive side of the ball. And there's not a whole lot of difference between Alabama and Georgia's recruiting, not just overall, but on the defensive side of the ball than Ohio State. Now let's look at the defensive performance on the field from 2017 all the way through 21, the last 5 football seasons, and there's no comparison. Alabama and Georgia have consistently fielded statistically top 10 to 15 defenses in the country, but we know even better than that, based on the competition that they play, that Alabama and Georgia are fielding top 5 defenses in the country. Let's compare the Bulldogs and the Tide to Ohio State. Starting with total defensive measures here. In 2017, Alabama and Georgia had 2 of the best defenses in the country, and ironically, they played in the national championship game. Ohio State wasn't too bad in 2017 in total defense, top 10 in the nation. Then in 2018, the Tide was still good, top 10 in the nation. Georgia just slightly less than that. 2018, they went to the SEC championship game that year, and that's when the Buckeyes really fell off the horse. 68th in the nation in total defense, and had those horrendous efforts against Purdue and Maryland, in particular, giving up 49 and 51 points. In 2019, this is, again, total defense. Bama, top 20. Georgia, exceptional at number 4 in the nation. And Ohio State, actually, that was the Chase Young, Jeffrey Okudah, who turned out to be 2 of the top 3 NFL draft selections. Ohio State was tremendous on defense that particular year, and going 13-0 in the regular season. They had the second best defense in the country in regards to total yards given up. In 2020, Alabama, top 30 defense. They had some rough efforts against Ole Miss in particular and Florida in the SEC championship game, but at number 32, Georgia, a strong team that lost a couple early games to Florida and Bama, but finished strong with a Peach Bowl win against Cincinnati in a top 12 defense in the country. Ohio State, horrendous in 2020, capped off by giving up 52 to Bama in the national championship game. And Ohio State also gave up tons of points and yardage against Indiana in particular in that 2020 season, finishing at 59th. Now let's look at points per game given up. Go back to 2017. Bama was the best. Georgia was top 4. Ohio State, a respectable number 22, but nowhere in the league of Georgia and Bama. In 2018, Bama had a top 4 defense in scoring as they reached the national championship game against Clemson before they got bloodied in that game. Georgia at number 16. Look at Ohio State again. That was the down year against Purdue and Maryland, even though the Buckeyes still went 13-1, won the Big Ten championship, the Rose Bowl, and finished number 3 in the country. Defensively awful, number 55 in the country in scoring. 2019, Bama at number 15 in scoring defense. Georgia was exceptional at number 2, and Ohio State exceptional. Again, the Chase Young, Jeffrey Okudah team, number 3 in the nation. This is the aberration for Ohio State. Bad defense for 5 years except for 2019. Then in 2020, Bama was number 13 in the nation as they marched on to a national championship led by the offense, but still the defense, number 13 in scoring defense. Georgia at 16. There's Ohio State at 43. In 2021, this past season, Bama goes back to the national title game with a top 20 scoring defense. Georgia, of course, was the best of the last 10 years, 15 years. And Ohio State, number 26 in the nation in total defense. Again, not a disaster, but not in the league of Georgia and Alabama. So what goes into great defensive performance on the field? Well, first you need to acquire the talent. That's the recruiting rankings. That's the reflection of the talent acquisition. Then number 2, you develop the players as individuals, their skill sets, strength and conditioning, and get the most out of their abilities. Then number 3 is building a scheme that's an effective scheme in stopping an offense and also effective in utilizing the strengths of those players you recruited. And then lastly would be, once you get into the games, being able to make in-game adjustments to what you see from the opponent's offense. Well, Ohio State obviously has not been effective at that. And you've got defensive performances that were awful across the board for the Buckeyes in comparison especially to the defensive talent, except for 2019. And the defensive coordinators for the Buckeyes during this time, of course, Greg Schiano from 2016 through 18, the worst defensive season for the Buckeyes under the leadership of Greg Schiano. Then you had Alex Grinch take over the defense solely in 2019, and then Kerry Combs in 2020 and 21. So now we arrive at 2022, and is there hope that the Ohio State defensive performance is going to match the talent and rival Georgia and Alabama on the field? Well, there's hope because Jim Knowles comes in from Oklahoma State, and the Cowboys fielded one of the best defenses in the nation in 2021 and came within a whisker of a Big 12 championship and a college football playoff appearance. But let's look a little bit deeper into the performance of Jim Knowles' defenses in Stillwater. So prior to Jim Knowles taking over at Oklahoma State, the Cowboys ranked 73rd in the nation in total defense. The first year that he got there, did they improve? No, they got worse. 100th in the nation in total defense, followed by 86th, slightly better, but still bad. Then 44th, a substantial increase in performance in 2020. And then in 2021, you're then looking at the third ranked defense in the country. And in terms of scoring defense, 1 year prior to Jim Knowles, 86th in the country. They got worse, 97th that first year, then 64th, 34th, and finally the 8th best scoring defense in the country under Jim Knowles. So it's an assumption, I think, by many Buckeyes fans that Ohio State's defense is going to get better in 2022. I have held to that as well, thinking Jim Knowles is going to come in, assess the talent, fix the scheme, develop the players, and get them ready to play. I still believe that to be true, but based on the numbers, we present the numbers and the facts, that's not necessarily a given for Ohio State's attempt to get to the level of Alabama and Georgia on the field and vie for a 2022 national championship. Your thoughts down below right here at the Voice of College Football. Hit that like button, and we will see you with another breakdown video very soon.